Hi Music 189ers! It's Sunday, time for your module wrap-up. As this is the third module, this means that you are officially halfway done with Music 189. Yes! So this module was pretty packed with information and assignments. You completed one activity, a review quiz on romanticism, 7 listening guide quizzes, and then 2 other assignments, the Analyzing First Movement Sonata Form worksheet and Comparing Forms in Popular and Art Music short answer quiz. You'll also note that on Sunday evening your film music report is due, even though that was from Module 2. So you'll see that the number of assignments and intensity of assignments increases as we move through the modules. So don't fall behind, and please let me know as soon as you are able if you have any questions. I want to help you out. Not too many questions. There were some questions regarding sonata form, so I do want to review that. Best way to do this is to go to the From Your Professor for Module 3, the first From Your Professor for Module 3. And I actually want to begin with the very first line here. So I want to distinguish these terms that are bolded. I know when you first arrived at this page you were like, oh my gosh, is there a symphony about salads? Does Professor H somehow work for Panera and this is a subliminal message? I don't know. No, it's none of the above. So classical era. The era just means the time period, and the time period may also have a certain style, right? A characteristic use of musical elements. Multi-movement cycle and forms, this refers to the structure of the music. And then genres, this is a broader way of organizing music. So in this module, you were introduced to, hopefully you'll note that I divided the module into 2 primary sections. The first section, which is what this From Your Professor regards, was in relation to instrumental music alone. And then the second half of the module was focused on vocal music. So for instrumental music, the era that you were focused on was the classical era and early romantic period. And the genres that you explored included the symphony, the string quartet, and the serenade. Now all of these specific genres, even though they are different from one another, feature the multi-movement cycle. The multi-movement cycle is a larger structure that consists of smaller forms. So form on form on form on form on form, stacks on stacks on stacks on stacks on stacks. All right, so the 4 movements, I'm just going to skip right to the review chart here that summarizes the 4 movements. So certain genres consist of only 3 movements. Most genres consist of 4 movements, and today a multi-movement cycle can consist of 6 or 7 movements. It just depends. So this 3 or 4 movement structure is really specific to the classical and romantic eras of music because composers begin to explore and experiment with these forms and these genres as we move into the late 19th century all the way to today. So our 4 movements here have very specific characters, tempi, and form. And so if we zoom in on the form for the first movement, that form is called First Movement Sonata Form. I'm going to actually explain this in relation to your Mozart Symphony No. 40 assignment. The second movement could be a variety of forms, but I want you to focus on theme and variations. That's the primary form you should know for the second movement. The third movement, and this is specific to genres such as the symphony, features a minuet and trio, a dance-specific movement. And in the Romantic period, it's called the scherzo and trio. The fourth movement is going to be a variety. So I didn't have you actually explore fourth movement in a specific piece because it could be a variety of what you explored for movements 1 and 2. All right, the genres that you explored are covered here, and at the very end there's this great video summarizing the multi-movement cycle. And it's craziness. It's a bunch of things. So let's go ahead and zoom in on sonata form because that is what I did receive some questions about. And if this review is not sufficient, please feel free to email and we can set up a video chat because I know it is a harder concept for non-music majors and even for music majors. So if we go to Module 3, where is it? Step 5 was this analyzing first movement sonata form document. So the point of this was not actually to get it perfect on your first try. So as you were filling out this chart, I didn't want you to get all of the answers perfectly right. I hoped that you would learn from your mistakes actually. So you watched one video here, and it also included a graphical representation of sonata form, and I had you try to see if you could hear distinctions in our musical elements. Okay, so distinctions between melody, harmony, instrumentation, dynamics, texture, and rhythm and or tempo. By listening or focusing in on these musical elements, and when the majority of them really have changed, that usually signifies a change in the form. So there are 3 primary parts to sonata form: the exposition, the development, and recapitulation. In the exposition, we have 2 characters that are introduced. So this whole multi-movement cycle, this whole sonata form in particular, is akin to the narrative structure of a novel, which was on the rise in the turn of the 19th century as well. So usually in a novel, right, in your exposition or the introduction, you're introduced to your characters, right, or your 2 families, right, Capulets and the Montagues. And then basically stuff happens. Ish goes down, if you know what I mean. And that's what happens in the musical development. This is where there's the most conflict and tension, specifically in harmony, right? Because we know that harmony is something that creates tension for us through dissonance. And then the recapitulation is our resolution, and is very similar to the exposition, but is different in a very, very specific way. So the primary difference in musical elements between these parts is actually in harmony. But I know harmony can be hard to hear. What is the difference between major and minor, for instance? How do I hear that, Professor H? So that's why I also have you distinguish the other musical elements to help guide you. So in the exposition, harmonically speaking, theme 1 is in 1 key or tonal center. So say C major, E flat major, F major, G minor, something like that. And then theme 2 is its own key. It's its own individual personality. So you could have theme 1, but they're still kind of related, so like distant cousins or something. So you might have theme 1 in G minor, theme 2 in E or B flat major, right? They're related keys. Then your development happens. You usually repeat these 2. So you'll have theme 1 and theme 2. You have a little bridge back to theme 1 and theme 2 because in the classical era it's always about balance, and you want to balance the presentation of these themes. The development, this is when you begin to literally develop the themes that you heard in the exposition. Sometimes only one of the themes, sometimes a brand new theme, because this is where the most conflict. So out of conflict arises an entirely new theme. Once you begin to hear the beginning again, that means you've returned to the recapitulation. But that difference I was talking about in relation to harmony is that theme 1 and theme 2, they're in the same keys. Alright, so because they're in the same keys, that means that theme 2 will sound a little bit different than it sounded in the exposition. So after you completed this sonata form chart, and tried your best to hear differences between our musical elements, you then watched a second video, the same piece, Mozart Symphony No. 40, but it was a guided listening experience to help you differentiate between themes 1 and 2 of the exposition, their repeat, the development, and then the recapitulation, and the similarity between themes 1 and 2 rather than their difference that was experienced in the exposition. So this is instrumental music form. The other half of the module was regarding vocal form, specifically of art song in Germany in the 19th century. The German Lied is the genre. So if I go to From Your Professor, I just want to point out the three primary or most popular forms of the German Lied. This includes strophic form, modified strophic form, through composed form. So strophic form, this just means that for every verse, so if you think this is an art song, that means you're going to have verses that are sung by a performer. And every verse is going to feature the same music. So the same music is repeated again and again and again, no matter what the text is saying. Through composed is different than that. You have different text, right? Verse after verse after verse, and you're also going to have different music occur for each of those verses as well. Modified strophic is in the middle with leaning towards towards strophic form a little bit. So this means you might start out in strophic form and have repeating music for each of the verses, but for say verse 5 out of 7 you might feature some different music. And by featuring different music, you might be doing this to underline a specific meaning in the text. So the assignment that you had regarding vocal form was to link musical form in vocal music to the meaning that you might have derived from the lyrics. In instrumental music, the form is instrumental, if you will, in understanding meaning, because there are no lyrics necessarily to come up with form. For vocal music, however, I experienced this after reading your musical meaning blogs. It's very common to derive meaning from the lyrics instead of from the music. Whereas with purely instrumental music that has no story, you have to rely sometimes on that form, the narrative form of the music. So if you have any questions about instrumental or vocal form, just let me know, and I will see you for the Module 4 wrap-up.